Mimic 1 is a program that has been causing chaos in the Pizzaplex's attractions and animatronics from the Tales of the Pizzaplex books. But what exactly is Mimic 1? And could it be William Afton, the overarching antagonist who's been haunting this franchise for years at this point? Well, let's take a deeper dive into this. In the second story of the Bobby Dots conclusion, The Storyteller, which was about a multicolored artificial baobab tree that was constructed by Fazbear Entertainment LLC to lay off the creative division, to which the head of, Edwin Murray, was trying to prevent from becoming fully operational. And despite his best efforts, the tree, with its fiber optic roots which served as a network connected to the Pizzaplex's venues and various animatronics, would be given their instructions from the Storyteller, despite Edwin's dismay. And while unbeknownst to the board, Edwin was anxiously watching the construction, and he saw the head of a white tiger animatronic with heterochromatic eyes. And after seeing the head, Edwin remembers an incident from the past. He began to have flashbacks to the sounds of screaming and the sight of blood. And while the chairman of the board, Mr. Burroughs, was quick to notice Edwin snooping, after a quick confrontation with Edwin, he began to fully execute the rollout of the Storyteller. Well, the inauguration of the Storyteller was chaotic, yet immediately showed its effect on the Pizzaplex's attractions and animatronics. With the Glamrock started malfunctioning, switching voices, and shutting down abruptly. Glamrock Freddy starts acting like a brat. Chica becomes starved for attention. Roxy becomes a cruel bully, and Monty gets violently aggressive, which strangely parallels how the animatronics outside of Freddy act in the base game of Security Breach. And on top of all of that, the facility itself was affected, with doors randomly locking and unlocking. But unfazed, Mr. Burroughs dismissed Edwin's concerns about all these sudden changes. And despite the cover-up-like nature of the situation, Edwin continues his investigation, going to a Fazbear-owned warehouse and looking through the archives for clues about the Storyteller's programming. Easily enough, he finds the file for the Storyteller, which has a sketch of the tree and ways to get in. Determined, Edwin returns to the Pizzaplex and follows the instructions, activating a catwalk that went towards the tree. Edwin makes his way to the top of the tree and finds an open panel. Drops down, coming face to face with the tiger's head. It was described as the eyes were colored green and blue, and its mouth was open, exposing its silver teeth. It was mounted onto the tree's interior, connected to a computer terminal, and despite fearing the tiger, Edwin persevered and looked into the systems. He noticed that the Storyteller was running a program called Mimic 1. And Edwin spent the next few days going in and out of the tree, trying to fix the programming. One day, Mr. Burroughs noticed the panel on top of the tree, realizing that was how Edwin kept sneaking in. While operating the tree systems remotely, Mr. Burroughs watched on the cameras as Edwin went inside the tree, and he locked it from the inside. He planned on leaving Edwin in there to slowly suffocate to death, believing that he was the cause of all the malfunctions. And after a few days, the tech crew wants to go into the tree for maintenance, and to cover his tracks, Mr. Burroughs decides to check and see if Edwin is dead, and if he was, to dispose of him properly. Mr. Burroughs went in expecting to see that Edwin had survived somehow. Instead, he found him limp on the ground with paper and a crayon. He was in the middle of drawing a stick figure. He'd also written, "I'm sorry," on one of the papers. And even a person like him was nerve-wracked by the sight. Mr. Burroughs tried to exit through the tree's front entrance. He puts his palm on the scanner, but it doesn't work. Now, locked in to the same fate that Edwin was, he tries to disconnect the Storyteller to get everyone's attention. He starts to rip out the wires, but the white tiger, it stared at him, mocking him. His eyes remained lit. He tries frantically entering his password into the terminal, but it fails. Eventually, he'd become so desperate that he just starts to punch the tiger, but it still remains active. Slowly, everything starts to fade around him, just as it did to Edwin. The lone nature of these subroutines alone point it as being an in-book parallel to Glitch Trap, while the physical parallel might actually be the mimic endoskeleton from the epilogues. And to sum up the epilogues we have so far, a construction crew is cleaning out the remains of Freddy Fazbear's pizza place. the FNAF 6 pizzeria that Henry set up as a trap to finally set the souls of the missing children's incident, Elizabeth Afton and William Afton, free, to be turned into a museum of sorts. One day, while getting bored of the mind-numbing tasks of deconstructing the endoskeletons, an employee named Gil decides to try and automate his workload. The same day, Fazbear Entertainment LLC receives a new batch of state-of-the-art animatronics, 5 of them to be exact. The first 4 are the classics that we all know and love, but there's one that stands out. It's dirty, discolored. Only its head appears to be shiny. It's suggested that it looks like it had survived a fire. Gil, once again tired of his monotonous work, decides to steal the malfunctioning 5th member, whom he had speculated to be the guitarist of the group. Upon closer inspection, he noticed it to have a steel frame with many metal rods, ball joints, and pistons that allowed it to expand and contract its limbs at will. Its head rectangular shaped with white eyes and steel sockets. A pair of bent metal ears at the top. It has a small switch at the back of its skull that opens its mouth, allowing access to the circuits and wires inside. Its white eyes turn orange when it's activated. And despite the obvious rot of the animatronic, Gil programs the endo with a cleanup protocol to rip off the heads and the limbs of the endoskeletons for him. And as Gil congratulates himself on the work, the animatronic grabs onto him, breaks his arms off. Pools of blood splatter all over as Gil screamed in agony, only to be silenced when the robot ripped his head off from his shoulders. And nearly all the construction crew is annihilated at the hands of the creature, except one, a worker named Danny, who, after a small dance with death, rushed out of the trap pizzeria to beg and plead for the rest of the crew to seal up the location, never to be seen again. Following the sealing, a small group of teenagers hear rumors about the old pizzeria and about on how it's below the currently in construction Pizzaplex. They decided to observe the site multiple times before they would even dare enter it by themselves. After days and days of investigating, they noticed that every entrance has been sealed up with concrete, but there was a vent opening they could go through. The group climbed into the vent. They landed in a storage room and go out into the main area. Endoskeletons laid all over the place, along with the growing presence of a very, very odd but familiar stench. They looked down to see the entire crew, the 11 dead workers, decapitated and disarmed. A few robotic clanks later, they knew that they weren't alone either. And after an enthralling chase that left a good majority of the teenagers with the same fate as the workers, Lucia decided to search through the office's folders for information. She found an old operator's manual that dated back decades, which described different designs for endoskeletons. She recognized that the endoskeleton that was chasing them was a mimic. The mimic had retractable and expandable limbs, as well as a contracting torso so it could fit any animatronic shell. The manual said that if someone were to encounter a mimic endo, it should be disassembled after shutting off its power source. It's clear that this was not a normal mimic endoskeleton, as it seemed to have the ability to turn off sources of power at will. And now, where does that sound familiar? In Security Breach, there's an ending that involves going to the same pizzeria, and under you find Burn Trap, a withered Spring Bonnie animatronic infused with the corpse of what we can assume to be William Afton. Very little of the suit remains on his body. Only the head, ears, torso, pelvis, left thigh, and left foot remain. His endoskeleton appears to incorporate a mix of Springlock and Glamrock parts, as well as being infused with tendrils of burnt flesh. And his right hand has 2 skeletal fingers rather than robotic ones. And finally, the bottom half of his mask is gone, revealing his decaying jaw, similar to what we see under the Springtrap mask. And after analyzing all the evidence and clues presented in the Tales from the Pizzaplex series, it's highly likely that the mimic animatronic is the in-book parallel for William Afton. The similarities in their descriptions and the implications in the story strongly suggest that Vanny used bits and pieces of mutilated corpse from the FNAF 6 workers to mimic William Afton's body onto the endoskeleton and infect it with the glitch trap virus. While the description for the mimic animatronic is very similar and it seems somewhat implied that it is one and the same as the burn trap suit, the workers would have noticed a decaying corpse tied to it, so there's no way that it was delivered as burn trap. It had to be made into it, whether it had the help of Vanny or Patient 46. And this is where we end up right when security breach starts. She wants to move it to the body, but it's just not done yet. And while there may be some speculation involved with this theory, it's fascinating to explore the parallels between the book series and the game. What do you think about this theory? Just let me know in the comments below, and thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and this is my first time doing any of this, so please be sure to respond with some very criticism, please. And if you really enjoy this, please just hit the like button, of course, you know, the funny things. And also, if there's any other theories you'd like me to cover, please just let me know. Bye.